speaker for the final session for this Eucharistic Convention, Father John Hollowell. Now, you'll remember that Father spoke to us yesterday afternoon with the other leg of the entry, so to speak. We have faith and new evangelization as the theme for this Eucharistic Convention. Father spoke to us yesterday on the theme of faith, and today he speaks on the other leg of the entry, so to speak, new evangelization. Ladies and gentlemen, Father John Hollowell.
I've got a watch here, so don't worry. As a little bit of introduction, I wanted to let you know about a couple of priest friends of mine, and that will kind of I'll fall back on that and come back to them as we go forward. I have a priest friend who has a very dry sense of humor and is very good for me. Kind of like St. Paul, who said that he's thankful for the thorn that was placed in his side by God. This priest friend of mine calls me Blog Boy. Blog Boy. And so he'll call me up and be like, "Hey, Blog Boy, what's going on?" And because I maintain a blog, and he's sort of giving me a hard time about the fact that I'm Blog Boy. We were on a retreat together recently for priests, and Father Paul Nicholson, who was actually here last year from Canada, came up to me at the retreat, and I was sitting there with my priest friend, and Father Paul says, "Oh, it's Father Hollowell," and of course I'm like taken aback. I mean, what are you talking about? And Father, my priest friend who was there, has still failed to let go of that moment. And continues to give me a hard time about that. I have another priest friend who, maybe you've seen the Matrix poster, priest. A lot of seminaries, it was a poster that has actually made it to 6 of the continents. It may be on Antarctica, I don't know. But it's definitely on 6 continents. It's a priest who is talking about, it's this idea of kind of advertising vocations and the joy of vocations. And he was all over the news, the national news shows, being interviewed about that and so forth. So I have some really good priest friends who are in my life. And so then I want to share with you then, the reason I bring them up is because I want to tell you why I believe I am the perfect person to give this talk. And you might be thinking, oh, well, here, an arrogant American, he thinks he's the perfect person to give this talk about the new evangelization as a priest. But the reason I bring that up, when I was telling everyone, actually someone in our chancery, who's also a good friend, but is in sort of the power structure of the archdiocese, when they heard that I was going to New Zealand to give a talk on anything, they didn't care what it was on. They just said the fact that Father Hollowell, who's been a priest for 3.5 years, they said, "Why in the world do they want you?" And I said, "I don't know, but they're paying for my plane ticket, and I want to go." And and there's hobbits there. And the reason I'm the perfect person for this talk, and I mean this very sincerely, this is not any sort of false humility, is because I don't know why I'm here. And the good news about it is it doesn't matter. And precisely the fact that I am not a big deal, that I don't possess any sort of special, things that make me like this, internet sensation or whatever. My whole point, the whole point of my talk today is that I don't know why I'm here either. But I want to share with you some things that I've learned, and I think that along the way, and it's precisely because I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm not doing anything. I have a parish, 2 parishes kind of. I help out at one. And yet, nonetheless, so I'm not like spending all of my waking hours trying to do internet evangelization or to do new types of evangelization. It's not hard. You don't need special gifts. You don't need to be anything special. We're all special. We're all made in God's image and likeness. And we are all called to the new evangelization. And that's the whole point. And that's why I said I would be happy to come. Because they need to hear it not from Father Robert Barron, who is doing awesome work. You know, they don't need to hear it from some internet priest or someone on EWTN. What would be great is to have some parish priest that is doing very similar work to any other priest. And in fact, the same types of things that we're all called to do in terms of evangelization. My point, I hope that when you leave here, you feel empowered and realize that you are called to be a part of the new evangelization. The Second Vatican Council and John Paul II, in issuing this call for the new evangelization, did not say, if you have special gifts, do it. He said, do it. New evangelization. We're all in it. We're all called to participate in it. I want to describe to you or paint a scenario for you. There's a continent of people filled with approximately 1 billion people who are all hopeless, desperate, looking for answers, looking for the truth. And they have not heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. They have not heard the real presence. They have not heard the Catholic Church, the truth of the Church, the truth of God presented to them before. That continent is out there. And God, Christ, says, as we reflected on, as we heard in our gospel on Saturday, and it says elsewhere as well, He says, go to all the nations, all of them, and spread the good news. He didn't say, go to the nations where you feel comfortable. Go to the nations where you speak the language. Go to the nations only where you feel like you have what it takes to be there. He said, go. And that continent is real. It's called the internet. There are billions of people on there, atheistic, never having heard the real gospel presented to them. They may have heard Jesus Christ, but it may have been someone yelling at them. It may have been someone who had evil motives. They may have been abused. They've never heard Jesus Christ presented to them. There's billions and billions of them, and yet most of us hesitate to go there. I don't have special gifts or talents. I mean, we all have talents. I don't mean like, God didn't do anything for me. God gives us, but I think sometimes there's a fear. And I try to get other priests. It's like, guys, let's go. Put your homily online. Get a kid who can do that in his sleep. The camera costs less than your candlestick on your altar. Put a tripod in the back of your church, turn the camera on, record your homily. Put it online. But people are afraid all the time. I hear it from priests. Well, I'm afraid that it would make me a narcissist. Or I'm afraid that they would compare me to some other priest. Or I'm afraid that if I didn't do my very best, that people would be mad at me, or I would look stupid, or I would look like a failure, or I wouldn't do a good job. God doesn't care. He didn't say there's conditions to preaching to the nations. He said go preach. Do whatever it takes. The apostles, we have this. It's interesting when I try to help people get online or talk about internet work and so forth. There's this impression that to get on Twitter or Facebook or to have a blog or whatever is harder to do than Mandarin Chinese. I could never do that. Can you send an email? If you can send an email, you can do a blog, you can sign up for Twitter in 15 seconds, you can get on Facebook in 5 minutes. It doesn't kill you. There's no test like, oh, are you a hip young person who knows what you're doing here? They don't ask that. They ask for your email address and a password, and you're on Facebook. To make a blog, to type in a blog is quicker or is as easy as sending an email. But we treat it like it's Mandarin Chinese. Oh, I could never do that. You know what Jesus says? There's a whole continent of people out there who've not heard the gospel preached. And St. Paul says it right. Woe to me if I don't go. If you're afraid of what internet, and doing a blog or being on Facebook or being on Twitter or whatever, putting videos out there, doing new types of evangelization, if you're afraid of what it will do to you, then get over it. That's your issue. Deal with it. But God said, apostle on, disciple on, get on down the road. He didn't say, oh, well, let's see, who knows how to speak Indian? Okay, then we'll send Thomas to India. No, Thomas went to India and figured it out later. Thomas said, woe to me if I don't preach, and if I get there and I show up and they speak some new language, I'll learn it. And the Jesuits who would go all over the world in their heyday evangelizing, they didn't they went. They went, and we are called to do that. There's a whole continent, again, of people. And it's never been easier to go, and yet we have so many people that don't. And my invitation to you, my challenge to us today is to think about that. So I guess in some ways it's I think it's actually kind of sad that I'm here. I think it's kind of sad that I stand out in some way. I really do. Because I'm teaching a high school class for 3 years. And I filmed that. And I put it online, and people act like that's something that no one else is doing. And I look to the heavens, I look to God and say, why? Why is no one else doing that? Or why is there very few people? The harvest is abundant, but the laborers, for some unknown reason, are few. And I think mostly it's because of fear. You know what? I follow Planned Parenthood online. You may have seen the result of that at last year's conference. I think it's why I got invited. I follow them. They are, in many ways, at least with internet evangelization, they are killing us. You want to find a group of people who aren't afraid, who dive in, who say, you know what, I'm going to internet evangelize this continent of people who are looking for the truth. If we don't preach it, there is an army of people from the culture of death who are thrilled and prepared and mobilized and have a message and are ready to preach, and it's demonic. But why? Why do they gain traction? Because we're not putting out anything, because we're afraid. Or we don't think that we have the ability to sign up for an email account. Or we think if I put my homily online, or if my priest puts his homily online, or if I start a blog for Catholic moms, or if I start a blog for dads, or being a Catholic man, or getting on Facebook and spreading around pro-life articles, or getting on Twitter and utilizing that, we're afraid. And in our fear and in our paralysis, in comes the culture of death as an army of people who are on point, organized, and ready to swoop in and grab our young people by the throats and carry them off to hell. And I think that we will have a lot to answer for. And priests will have a lot to answer for their silence. I think about all the time, I think I had this kind of this funny dialogue or this sad dialogue show up. Imagine as a priest, you're at the pearly gates of St. Peter's of heaven. St. Peter is there, taking tickets. And an anonymous priest walks up and says, or an anonymous Catholic really, but let's stick to priest for a moment. Anonymous priest walks up and St. Peter says, "Hello, Father. Welcome. How many people did you preach to every weekend?" "Well, St. Peter, I probably averaged about 1,000 people or 2,000 people a weekend at my masses, and I really gave it a good go, prepared, didn't preach too long, did a nice job." And in St. Peter, I imagine St. Peter asking very politely but sternly, "Okay, so you reach 2,000 people a weekend. You realize that through no less effort of your own, you've heard of the internet?" "Yes, St. Peter, I have. I have heard of the internet." "You know that you could have reached 7 billion people." "Well, I did, but I don't know. I was afraid of what I would become, or I might become a rock star, or people might want to fly me to New Zealand, or... so I didn't." And I think that we will have something to answer for. It's amazing. It's at our fingertips. John Paul II was very wise in seeing this coming, new ways of evangelizing, and yet, I always just think if somebody came in with like a corporate mindset to the Catholic Church and they looked at how we were reaching out to people, they would give us like the lowest grade. If it was from 0 to 100, they would be like, the Catholic Church gets a -5 billion as a grade for its evangelization efforts. Planned Parenthood can send out bursts. They're immediate. They're on top of news. They're always there. They're persistent. They hammer things home. And then we're like, okay, what are we going to do about same-sex marriage? Well, let's have our people read an 80-page document. We fail because of fear. And we have to change that. And so I want to offer here, these final 10 minutes, I want to offer to you a couple of things, a couple of lessons that a novice priest, someone with no special internet abilities, I can't type, blindfolded or anything like that. Lessons of a novice priest from the internet, from the blogosphere. And I would like to title these, and I would like us to think about that gospel commandment to be shrewd as serpents and simple and as innocent as doves. We are called to be people of love. But if we do not study the way that the devil gets his message out, we are disobeying Christ's direct command. We are asked to be shrewd as serpents. Are we? Or are we watching our children simply be carried off by the vultures in the culture of death? Lesson number 1. Written things are good. So if you're going to get out there on the internet and you got something that's written, that's great. But studies have shown that videos are much, much more powerful. So you see sometimes people that are engaged in internet evangelization who will, again, as we were talking about the 80-page document, who will say, okay, well, a good first step is to kind of pass articles out, and say, hey, on your Facebook, hey, here's a great article I just read. It's safe. You're not judging them. You're just saying, hey, check this out. But that's step 1, and to realize that videos are even more powerful. And they say 4 times more powerful than that are images. Looking for good images and things that convey our gospel truths and our gospel messages and sharing them with the world is even more powerful. So we need to make sure that we're paying attention to that hierarchy of things as we engage those in the culture of death who are currently in its clutches. Number 2, we have someone contacted me from YouTube after I did the I Have a Say thing. It was a Catholic. And he said, hey, I can't, I got to do this off the record. It was really kind of strange. But he was saying, hey, I'm from YouTube. I can't tell you, I got to do this. I got to call you from home. It was like, wow, I'm CIA here or something. But he said, I want to share with you some lessons that I've learned. I watched your video and it was good, and I want to help you in your internet evangelization. And he said one of the things that they found at YouTube is that the average person watches for 87 seconds before tuning out or deciding to keep watching. You have 87 seconds to convince someone of the point that you're trying to make. And if they're not convinced, if young people are not convinced, especially after 87 seconds of watching something or reading something, they will trash it. So don't, we need to realize we have a lot of work to do in terms of focusing our message and getting it down to what are you trying to say? What are we trying to say to people? What do we want them to hear? In the United States, we had this voting guide, for how to vote as a Catholic, and it was 40 pages. No one read it. And the people that did were, a lot of people took it and twisted it. They found some word, because when you go on and on and on, you're bound to say something that's wrong. And so somebody took it, people were taking it, the culture of death took it and twisted it. Be brief, be focused, be on point. I love Twitter. If you're not familiar with Twitter, Twitter gives you 140 characters, about, 15 words or so. Twitter forces you to make a point. And there are some people who can't make a point because they don't have a point. And they'll just go on and on. So with Twitter, you can say, they can only go so far before you cut them off. We as the church have a lot to do, and we as Catholics have a lot to do to recognize that we need to focus our message. Mark Twain once said, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. I love that. We as the church sometimes, we didn't have time to write you, to summarize what we want you to understand. We didn't have time to summarize or to make it short, so we wrote a lot. I love encyclicals. I read them myself. But I can tell you that the atheist, the kid that thinks he's an atheist, that's 16 years old, that's into drugs and alcohol, is not going to read Deus Caritas Est. We need to be out there taking those things, summarizing them, bringing them home, turning them into video, turning them into photos, turning them into things that are a message that speaks to people. And in fact, Pope Benedict doesn't write Deus Caritas Est thinking that a drug-laden teenager will read it. He's assuming that we as Catholics will take it and present it. And that's our task. Number 3, we need to be people who respond to things immediately. When Cecile Richards' thing came out and my I Have a Say video was a response, that was something that was like, I got on it before planned. I just happened to see her invitation to say, hey, let's make an I Have a Say video. I said, amen. I will do that too. And I did it right away. Before the campaign, because we're always, I think as the church, we're always we seem as if we're reacting. We're never on the offensive. We're never out trying to get ahead of the storm. It seems like we're always just sort of reacting on the internet. And we need to do a better job not only of responding quickly and showing that we're on top of things. And we have a message too. Number 5, we need to learn the faith ourselves. The internet offers this amazing opportunity to gather and to learn about our faith. We are the most in the United States, we are the most uncatechized generation in ages. The internet gives us amazing opportunities and ways to get caught up very quickly. But we have to take advantage of that. People ask me all the time, they're like, hey, Father, what was the question? I have a question about plenary indulgences. And I'm always like, you go online, copy the link about plenary indulgences from Catholic Answers, and I send it to them. Instead of spending an hour or them having to look through the catechism, it's there. Do we care, though? Do we want to, or are we going to just, continue to watch the culture of death storm over us? Number 6, this is an important one. Or I think I lost count. I misnumbered. That's 5. Number 5. I don't think anybody's keeping track anyways of the numbers, but anyways, I'm a math guy, okay? So, number 5, invite the young people to lead the way. You know, oftentimes, again, as I was kind of talking yesterday, when kids show up at Mass and we're like, oh, spiritual infant. Well, here's a tambourine for you. And hey, I know you can't handle theology, so we're going to explain it with puppets. And kids are like, what? What are you talking about? You know who gets kids? The people who want to make money. MTV, Hollywood, television, all the products that are out there, Apple and iPods and computers and everything, all the marketing in the world now is geared towards 16-year-olds. They treat kids like they're spiritual adults and physical adults. And they are. They lead the way. They know they can send out 18 tweets and check their Facebook and their email and do a blog post before you can take a bite of cereal. But again, they show up to church and everywhere everyone else is affirming their dignity that they have as adults in transition. And they get to church and we're like, hey, how's it going? Here's a puppet. Those are the kids, the teenagers are the ones who could be leading your parish and you and showing you how to re-evangelize through the internet and through this new evangelization that we're called to. You want to know where kids are at? Start trusting them. Instead of treating them like they're spiritual infants, invite them to lead the charge, because I can promise you there's nothing more important for a teenager than to feel wanted and important. And instead of giving them a sock puppet when they walk in, asking them to lead up your parish's new evangelization efforts and video efforts and photography and blogging and websites and on, that's it. Because I tell you what, everyone else is asking teenagers to lead the way. Anybody that wants to make money, anybody that's involved in the culture of death is marketing themselves to them. But we don't, and we need to stop that. We need to invite them to be on the front line of the spiritual battle that is taking place. And they will respond. And they will teach you. They're there. We just have to give them that opportunity. I think of some of the young people that I work with. I'm working on a film company, with a film company for a homosexuality and Catholic Church teaching video. We're trying to do, again, this is some new evangelization, kind of represented with good music and art and beauty and compelling testimonies from people. The people that are leading that film company, young adults in their 20s. Grassroots Films doing amazing work in the United States. Spirit Juice, young adults. Catholic photographers and people who are doing great blogs, young adults. They're out there. If you invite them, they will respond. But we don't oftentimes. We don't oftentimes. Young people are leading the charge, at least in the parishes that I'm around and in the United States, in terms of, again, a return to sacred worship, and they want to do chant, and they will lead the way, and they will direct choirs, and they will participate, and they will serve at Mass. They want to serve. They want to take an active role. But we give them a sock puppet, unfortunately. Number 6, we need to invest money in it. We had for our film that we're doing right now on that homosexuality and Catholicism, we had a goal of $70,000, and a lot of people saw that and they were like, "Oh my goodness, there's no way." And we thought no way probably too. We ended up in 20 days we got $87,000, which is awesome. And again, I think it's people saw that we need that. But what happened, the sad thing about it at the same time, is that there are other documentaries out there that are being put out by the culture of death that are doing similar things. And even like stupid documentaries. Like we were looking at these websites that help you raise money for documentaries. And there were ones that were doing documentaries on video games. They raised $350,000 from people. We have to kind of imagine and re-understand. You know, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome has converted more people than all of the preaching that's ever taken place there. But it wasn't free. We have to invest and put our money into things and into this new evangelization, and support and look for artists and young adults and other people who are out there doing these types of efforts, and we need to invest in them, because I can promise you the culture of death is. The culture of death is investing billions of dollars into movies. Are we countering that? Are we trying to offer an alternative, or are we going to continue to just watch the vultures come in and carry our children and ourselves off into the distance? The final piece that I'll leave you with is that the new evangelization is not just the territory of the priests, it is the territory of the laity as well. And it may have been, at least it was in the United States for many years, that the model was, as a layperson, I don't have to worry about who's coming to church. I don't have to go knock on doors. I don't have to I don't have to evangelize. I don't have to go out to the streets. I don't have to do blogs or videos or art or whatever. I don't have to call to people. Father does that. That's Father's thing. I just show up at Mass. And John Paul II kind of kicked the door down on that. Said, wrong, not anymore. It's not Father's job anymore, it's all of our jobs. And in fact, it was a problem when we used to think that it was just Father's job. We're all called to it. And I think of all the great things that are going on in our country with the new evangelization, with LifeSite News and John Henry's work and Courageous Priests and all these great blogs, Catholic blogs that are run by lay people, and all the great Catholic moms and dads who are doing conventions and blogs and videos and hosting things. And I think of all the work of our sisters, and they're getting involved oftentimes in new evangelization. And there's all of these things that are happening. And I think of the work of Human Life International and Family Life International. This conference right here today, put on by lay people. I think of the efforts of Lila Rose and all these other people that are fighting the culture of death. Lay people. Film companies, like I mentioned. The new evangelization is an invitation to all people to go out and re-evangelize, re-propose the gospel to people who need to hear it. There's a continent full, a continent's worth of souls that have never heard the gospel, or they've heard it the wrong way, and are waiting for you, specifically you, to come and preach to them and to teach them the truth of Jesus Christ. We need to be people who are wise as serpents and innocent as doves. We pray for the strength and the courage and the conviction to do that. Amen.